So, we were looking at the different agents of cross-pollination after we looked at the what is self-pollination, what is cross-pollination. And we started looking at what are those different pollinating agents taking the responsibility of the pollination process in different flowers. So there were different agents. We had looked at the insect pollination, that is also called as entomophily, and we know now the characteristic that I did not revise. The second one was the anemophily, which was wind pollination. Again, there were few characteristics. Then the third that we had seen was the hydrophily, that is with the help of water, especially happening in the aquatic plants. And due to the certain density of these pollen grains, they will float on the surface where the flowers are present, the female flowers specifically, and they will get pollinated. And the example of this was Vallisneria plant. Now, so coming to this last part of the pollination, or the type of pollination that happens in flower, is ornithophily, which means the pollination happens by using the birds. So now most commonly used, rather most commonly type of pollination within, or rather most common flowers which undergo pollination using this ornithophily is the canna and bignonia. So this top one is the bignonia. Again, you would have seen this commonly in Sahyadri campus, and this surely, like if you know this in front of Shirali house, there is this root zone treatment where the sewage water treatment plant is there, right?
So can we drink nectar from that plant?
Yeah, you can. So this is the one plant. In Marathi, it is called as kardali, but otherwise it has like a banana leaf-like, not banana leaf-like, but very small one, but it is like a whole leaf, big one. So that is this canna. And apart from ornithophily, the one more type of pollination, which is kind of a little interesting, that's why I have kept it here, is elephophily. It is happening with the help of elephants. And the example of flower is this Rafflesia. It is one of the largest flower in the world, and it is found in the kind of Southeast Asia. So you can see the flower size. Actually, this picture is deliberately kept so that you can feel the size based on this height of these two youngsters. Yeah, you can see how big or how huge the flower is. And these pollen grains, usually when the elephants they are walking, they are attached to the feet of these elephants, and they are carried to the stigma of the another flower when they are trampled by those feet. So that is the way the pollination happens, and that is the Rafflesia flower. Apart from these, there are several other types based on like using moths and so on. But we are not going to go into those details. Even in case of some like more birds are involved, or other pollinating agents are involved. But like let's concentrate only on these four one. Even the bird pollination is not that much which happens in the surrounding. It's majorly these insect and wind, and if it is aquatic plant, it is water pollination. Okay, someone has raised hand. Anandya, I guess, right?
Yeah, sir.
Yes.
So in the elephophily, in that, won't the flower, like if it gets trampled, like won't it die or something? Because
so what they mean is, like when the flower is trampled, that's when the pollen grains they get attached, and when it falls onto the stigma of the another flower, then it will get fertilized. Yeah, it's not the other way. Maybe sentence construction might be.
But how is that possible? Like if the also like when the elephant is, let's say, the on the feet of the elephant, the pollen comes, and then it will walk for a while on the pollen, also get lost in the ground.
You know, the pollen grains, they are very tiny. They cannot like really get disturbed, and they have very comparatively hard cover around it. And plus, feet does not literally mean at the bottom, it can also mean on the sides. Yeah, so that is just the uh, way it happens. Okay, so any other question in the pollination part? Anyone? Okay, so then the last part of this pollination is the artificial pollination. Now, I guess at one time point I had discussed about this also. So when a person transfers the pollen grains to the stigma, that is what is called as artificial pollination. That means you pick up the anthers from one flower, and as a human being, you put it on the stigma of the similar flower of the same species, and that is what will be called as artificial pollination. Now, during this Babylonian civilization times, like that is very ancient ones, maybe around 3000 to 4000 years ago, it was a common practice to sprinkle these male flowers of palms on the female flowers, and they did not know what is the sexuality of the plant or the pollination that happens in the palm flower. They just used to do it because they found this particular activity of sprinkling the male flowers. They even did not know that these are male flowers. They used to just take flowers and sprinkle those flowers onto the palm flowers, like another variety of the palm flowers. Variety in the sense, they just had they used to pluck the flowers from one plant and they used to sprinkle it on the other plants. So that way they used to do it. And this particular process used to give them good yields of this palm oil and stuff. And that way they used to like continue. So that is what used to happen. And like that is actually artificial pollination, which is existent since then, without people knowing or calling it any terms. That is what is artificial pollination. And it is also called as artificial crossing, which is a standard practice which is adopted by the plant breeders to evolve new varieties. So there is very interesting experiment which is done by Gregor John Mendel. So Mendel is considered as a father of genetics in biology, because after his studies, people started studying a lot of genetics. That was in, I guess, 1884 or so, or 1860s. Around 1860, he had studied all those genetic characteristics, and that's why he is considered as father of genetics. So what he did was he took these garden pea plants and then he crossed the varieties of garden pea plant, and he observed certain traits. How are the traits being passed down across the generation? Like some flowers were purple, some flowers were white, some seeds or these green peas, they were yellow in color, some green seeds, they were green in color. So that way he observed all these traits and how are they passing down across generations. And then he postulated certain hypotheses. So that this particular fact is like possible because of this artificial pollination type of experiment. So that is the same thing we mentioned in the third point. Artificial crossing is a standard practice adopted by the plant breeders to evolve new varieties. Now again, let's say you see pollen grain of a white rose, and if you see stigma, like you take this pollen grain from white rose and put it onto the stigma of the like red rose, and then those seeds that you will obtain after the fertilization, if at all it is possible and if at all the pollen grains are acceptable, you might give a rise to a new variety which could be pink or maybe a little different color of or shades of white and red. So that is what is artificial crossing. Or another common example that is happening in terms of farming is usually what we do is if you have ever checked with the farmers, what they do is they have a huge farm which has grown of, let's say, rice, wheat, or whatsoever, groundnut. And what they do is they pick up the bigger height of the plant, and then they preserve that particular seeds. Or they, let's say, if it is a wheat or rice, what they do is the husk, or rather the fruit part of the rice, which has many of these rice grains or wheat grains, they keep that, and then they make seeds of these again and again. So what is happening there is they are choosing one particular species or variety, and then they are growing it, which will ultimately allow the artificial crossing in the next generations and so on. So that way, these plant breeders, they create new varieties based on these pollination processes. Now, there are different processes which are involved. One of them being called as emasculation. Now, you all know what masculine is. So, emasculation is something like you remove the anthers, that is the male gamete, in the young flowers, so that there is no self-pollination which could happen, and the only possible way would be cross-pollination. So, the moment you remove the anthers and you don't allow those anthers to fall onto the stigma at all, so that is what is called as emasculation. The another process is called as bagging, which literally means you cover the flowers with the plastic bag so that no other pollen grains can fall onto the stigma of the flower. So that is what is emasculation and bagging, which are the two processes being used for the artificial pollination. And usually artificial pollination will give rise to a desired variety, because I know what I'm crossing with. So I can cross with, let's say, again, one of the wheat has a taller and sturdier stem, and the other wheat has more number of grains in the husk part. So that way, if I cross these two varieties artificially, then the next generation that I will get is most likely going to be a tall one with many number of grains, or with many grains in the one particular plant. So that way there are several other artificial pollination that can be done in nature. Any question here? I hope this part is clear, and also the emasculation process and the bagging process. Okay, now there are these two examples which we have to see, specific examples, that how does the pollination happens in the sweet bee using insect, and the second one is of the wind pollination in maize. I will just quickly go through, because we already know this process in detail. So a bee is an agent of pollination in the sweet bee plant. And the flowers, they are colorful and they contain nectar as well in case of the sweet bee. There are two varieties actually. What we know commonly is garden bee, garden peas, and these one, that is the sweet peas. So these are two different varieties. But yeah, again, that is not our concern right away here. So it lands on the petals and inserts the proboscis, right? So a bee has a proboscis which is like going to pull out the nectar. It is a tubular structure. So what this bee will do is it will sit on the petals. It will insert the proboscis in the flower for nectar, and this makes the wing petal and the Heel petal to push down. Okay, something is wrong there. But what happens there is, so this, because of this pushing down of the proboscis, the wings, they get spread out on the side a bit, and they will push down the petal.
What's the proboscis?
Proboscis is the tubular structure to suck the nectar.
Oh.
Let me show you if you don't know this. Proboscis.
The part of the bee, no, that
Yeah. Images. Yeah, I guess you can see it here.
Oh, the thing.
This one. Yeah. The sting kind of part.
So also, like when the bee stings, then this comes off, right?
In some cases, it comes off. In some cases, it just pours some acid. See, you can see this is proboscis with the nectar here. Right? This very high resolution image. Okay, so yeah, I guess I have to remove this part. I don't know what is this. The heel petal. I guess the petal push down. Yeah, fine. This should be okay. Though the statement is still wrong. But yeah, I will correct it later. I don't know what I was doing. But yes, so like when the proboscis is down within the flower to push, sorry, not the push, to suck the nectar, the wings will push down the petal, and in this process, the pollen grains from the anther, they are stuck to the proboscis of the bee. And also, it's not only the proboscis it will get stuck, which is quite obvious, because due to the wind, the anthers might have a little scattered around the petal, and they might stick to the wing and also to whole body. But majorly because the proboscis is going inside, they will stick majorly to it. And there is always a chance that body of the bee having the pollen grains as well of the another flower on it, as it comes in contact with the stigma of many flowers. And then when this bee will come and sit onto this the same flower as in the same species, another flower, it will obviously deposit these pollen grains, and that way the pollination will happen and then fertilization will happen. So the process, I guess it's very simple. What you need to know here is this word called as proboscis, which is used which is the structure in these bees, which is used to suck the nectar from the flower, and the pollen grains, they get transported due to this proboscis as well as the other body parts. So that is how is the insect pollination happens. Why is this here? Oh yeah. So this is just one of the example. So usually the nectar will be somewhere here. So when the bees will go inside, they will put, now this is the how the pollen grains get attached to the body. That is the example. But usually when the flower arrangement, usually the flower arrangements are different in different flowers. And that way, when the pollen grains, they are attached to the body or to the proboscis, they will get stuck with this stigma, and that way the pollination can happen. So there are different possible ways. This is just one way that has been shown here in particular flower. I don't know why I have kept it. I might have been thinking something else to explain, but I'm not remembering it as of now. But so this is just one case. Now the next one is the wind pollination. Wind pollination, you know what would happen. So in the maize flower, the anthers, they are loosely connected to the filaments. That was one of the characteristics for the wind pollinated plants. And they can be moved by slightest blow of the wind, and this makes the pollens blow away very easily. Now, these pollen grains may land on the feathery stigma coming out of the petals from another female flower, as it has large surface. And of course, the self-pollination is not possible, as the male flowers, they mature earlier than the female flower. This is the one of the very important characteristics of the maize, that the male flowers, they mature earlier. That means this is what kind of what was that? Protandry or protogyny, which is the situation when the male flowers they are maturing earlier.
Protoandry.
Right? It's very simple one. Androecium, that is the proandroecium, that is the earlier maturation of the male gametes or male flower. That is what is protandry, and that is what happens in the maize. And this is the diagram of the maize. So this is the male inflorescence, that is the pollen grains. So this is always maturing first, and these will be the styles. Like if you have ever seen the maize flowers, from where this corn they come out, you would have seen typically this plant. But if you have ever observed the flowers, you can see the styles, they are kind of hanging out of the flower, female flower specifically, and these anthers they can fall onto this stigma, and there is a chance of self-pollination as well. So this is how it happens in the maize plant. Okay, so again, any question, anyone? And this part is very, very interesting, the fertilization part. Okay, so I assume there are no questions. Now, so we now know what is pollination, which is the transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma. Now, the moment the pollen grains they are on stigma, what happens to these pollen grains and what happens to the female gametes or female reproductive structure? That is what we are going to see in the whole process of fertilization. So, fertilization as such refers to the fusion of the male and female gametes, right? Or the nuclei of these gametes. When we talk of male and female gamete, we talk of their cells, right? That is, in case of human, male gamete is sperm. In case of female, the female gamete is ovule, right? And it's not actually the fusion of these cells, it is rather the fusion of their nuclei. But in common language, we call the fusion of the male and female gamete. That is what we refer to as fertilization. Now, in flowering plant, these facts we already know. Pollen grain is the male gamete, and ovules, which are present inside the ovary, these are the female gamete. Now, we will just overlook at the structure of both of these gametes. That is what, how does the pollen grain look like and how does ovule looks like within the flowering plants. Now, if you look at this diagram in front of you on the right bottom side, that is the pollen grain structure. So the mature pollen grain is a cell, that means it's a single cell with double wall. So it is a single cell with double wall, and this double wall consists of outermost layer, that is exine. X refers to outer one, and inner one, that is intine. In, that refers to the inner part or inner layer. So that way this pollen grain has two layers. If you see, exine is much thicker and it is kind of broken also at many points. That is exine. And the inner thin layer that you see this intine is pointed at this inner circle. That is what is intine. So these are the two layers. And its nucleus has already been divided into tube nucleus and generative nucleus. Remember, I must emphasize that you need to remember all these terminologies. Yeah, in terms of structure, in terms of the processes, especially this fertilization part, you will have too many new terminologies, and it is very easier if you try and understand it. So pollen grain has two walls, exine, that is the outer one, intine, that is the inner one. Now within this inner one, it will have cytoplasmic space, it will have nucleus, and nucleus is divided into two nucleuses, right? One is called as cube nucleus and the other one is called as generative nucleus. Why tube nucleus? Because later it grows like a tube. Not the nucleus, but it goes with the pollen tube, and that is what is called as tube nucleus. And the generative nucleus, because it generates the zygote later. When this one of the nucleus, that is the generative nucleus, will fuse with the female gamete or the nuclei from the female gamete, then it will generate the new offspring, and that is why it is called as generative nucleus. So you have to remember the nucleus in the pollen grain is already divided into two. One is tube nucleus. It's called so because it goes with the pollen tube. And the second one, that is generative nucleus, it is called so because it is going to generate the zygote after fusion with the female gamete. So these are the two nucleus within the pollen grain. Now at this stage, the pollen is transferred to the stigma, that is the pollination process. This is what is called as mature pollen grain. Yeah, when it has all these structures, that is exine in time, the cytoplasmic space, and of course all the other components, they will be there, like what you know of vacuoles, cell organelles, and so on. So that way these will be there, and these two nucleuses divided, that is one is tube nucleus and other one is generative nucleus. Now this generative cell is actually a wrong label. Ideally it should be a generative nucleus, because within a cell there cannot be another cell. It has to be generative nucleus. So that is what is being like wrongly mentioned in this diagram, but I guess you can relate it to the.
So, sir, the generative cell is the one that fuses with the ovule.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So then like that is what is the third point we mentioned here. The pollen is transferred to stigma when it is matured and when it has all the structure. Now the subsequent changes in the pollen grain, they occur only if it has fallen on the stigma of a plant of the same species. Then only the subsequent changes for the further fertilization process will occur, otherwise they will not occur. So that is the whole structure of the pollen grain. Again, what you need to remember there is exine, outermost layer, intine, innermost layer, then the two nucleuses, that is tube nucleus and the generative nucleus, and the rest common knowledge you already have. So these are the four things that you need to remember from this particular structure of the pollen grain. Any doubt here? You people don't have the details of these. What does the exine do? What does intine do? How it is arranged? What is the function of tube nucleus? What is the generative nucleus? In a way, we briefed it in one line, but there is still quite a lot that can be discussed here. So for example, exine, you can see it is very, very thick layer that is being shown. And also there are gaps at some points. Like for example, germ pore is being shown here. So we will see that what this germ pore leads to later. So what happens is this exine has to be broken like this. So whenever the pollen grain falls onto the stigma, it will create an outgrowth, which we call as pollen tube, right? And this pollen tube will grow from the germ pore. And that is why the outer layer, that is the exine, has to be broken there. So that we will see in the further process. So this is what we know as pollen grain. We will just look at the structure of the ovule for today, and then we will stop. Now, in structure of the ovule, again, there are few new terminologies that you will have to remember. So, ovule is the inner part of the ovary. Most of the students, again, they get confused here. What is ovule? What is ovary? Then what is female gamete? What is gynoecium? What is carpel? What is pistil? All these things, they are kind of intermixed, or they can be alternate names of each other. So be very, very aware of these particular things. So ovule is the inner part of the ovary, which will become seed, and the ovary becomes fruit. So again, every one of you have seen what fruits are, right? Or how do they look like? So the whole of the fruit is actually an ovary of the fruit, flower, and the seeds within the fruit, they are nothing but the ovules of that particular flower. So ovary is a bigger one, and ovules are present within it as the subcomponent. A single ovule, and this can be of like two different types. A single ovule producing a single seeded fruit. For example, mango, only one seed, right? Or even grape. Grape, it also has a single seed, like individual grape. Then many ovules producing many seeded fruit, strawberry for that matter, or berries of those types. So these are multiple ovules with many seeded fruit. So that way, or even apple, one apple or one orange has many seeds inside, right? And this is very commonly known phenomenon. So that way, it can be either single ovule with single seeded fruit, or many ovule producing many seeded fruit. So this can be of two types. Now, each ovule has one or two protective coverings. That is what is called as integuments. Integuments, these are the covering of the ovule. So let me show you the diagram here. Now the diagram will look very complicated, but it is not at all complicated. It's simply oval shaped structure, which has these two layers around the central part, which is called as integument. And they are present throughout, except at one particular point that we will see what it is. So, but you can see it is, these are the integuments, these two layers that are being shown. These are the integuments of the ovule. Now, in some cases, there can be single, there can be two, depending on what type of ovule it is, but you need not go into those details as of now. The integuments, that is the protective coverings, they leave a small opening, which is called as micropyle at one of the end. And that opening is for the entry of the pollen tube. So again, here you can see there is an opening with the integuments or in between the integuments. And that is called as micropyle. And this will allow the entry of the pollen tube into the into this ovule, so that it can fuse with the egg cell, right? So that is the micropyle. So far what we had looked at is the integuments, which are the outermost covering. Can be one, can be two, depending on what type of ovule and plant it is. Second one we had seen was the micropyle, which is the opening within the integuments, so that the function of micropyle is to allow the entry of pollen tubes. So that is what is called as micropyle. Enclosed by the integument is the nucellus. Now, do not get confused this with the nucleus. Nucellus is actually the mass of food. That means the nourishing cells of the ovule, which has quite a lot of nutrition, and that is why it is called as nucellus. So again, whole of this, the inner portion, which we otherwise called as cytoplasmic space, these are all part of nucellus, and these are highly nutritious cells. Now you can imagine why this would be there. You know, whenever fertilization has happened of the male and female gamete, then this starts growing into fruit, and the egg and the sperm fusion starts growing as the seed. Now that way, if the fruit has to grow, it has to have lot of nutrition, which is ultimately from this nucellus portion. So enclosed by the integument is the nucellus, which is a mass of the food-laden cells, and further inside the nucellus is the embryo sac. So you can see this particular small oval shape is your embryo sac. So integuments, micropyle, nucellus, and within the nucellus we have embryo sac. Embryo sacs consist of 7 cells in total. There are 3 antipodal cells on the top or on the front part. Then there are 3 cells at the bottom, which are, one of them is the egg cell. You can see here double walled cell that is being shown here. That is the egg cell, and the rest 2 cells, these are the synergid cells. So now you have to remember which cells are present where. Next to egg cells, they are always synergid cells, and they are present towards the micropylar end, so that whenever the pollen tube enters, it will break open the synergid cell. It will go and fuse with the male gamete will go and fuse with the egg cell, and that way, that's why you can also logically remember at the micropylar end there are these synergid cell and the egg cell. So 3 cells at the micropylar end, out of which 1 is egg cell and 2 are synergid cells or synergid simply. And the 3 cells at the opposite end, actually the opposite to micropyle is this chalaza, and this is called as chalazal end, from where this funiculus like structure grows. Now again, this is something like you had seen the ovules, they are connected to ovary with certain structure, right? That connecting junction is this one. Yeah, whatever you see outgrowth, this black portion and even the outer little light green portion around it. So that is what is the funicle or funiculus, it is called as. So that joins at this chalaza, and from there the integuments they start. So within this embryo sac, what you have is the antipodal cells on the chalazal side or opposite to micropyle end. Then on micropyle end, you have 2 synergid cell, 1 egg cell, and at the center, what you have is the nucleus. So 1 large central cell, and the central cell contains 2 polar nuclei. Now imagine these are multiple cells. Yeah. Within the ovule, there are multiple cells. Within the pollen grain, it is a single cell. This particular is a single cell. This one is a multicellular structure. Understand the difference, yeah? And this particular one is actually coming from 1 single cell, and then the egg cell is one of the cell within whole of the ovule, yeah? So that way, the difference, I hope you are able to get it. So at the center, what you have is the large central cell, and the central cell contains 2 polar nuclei. Usually each cell has a single nucleus, but this particular cell within the embryo, which is the 7th cell, has 2 polar nuclei, 2 nuclei within it. So that is the whole structure of the ovule. So let me just quickly revise and then I'll take questions. Again, these 2 integuments, I know it can be really hard to remember all these names, but for me, because I have practiced it enough, I guess it comes to me very naturally. For you people, it might take a little time, but don't get sad because of that. It will come to you, but all these names you need to remember. So integument, which are protective covering around the ovule. Micropyle, which is the opening between the integuments, it is called as micropyle. At the micropyle end, what you have is the embryo sac, the whole structure. Embryo sac has 7 cells, which has 2 synergid cell and 1 egg cell on the micropylar end, and it has 3 antipodal cells on the opposite to micropyle end, which is also called as chalazal end. Within the integument, there is nucellus, which is the nourishment portion. Chalazal end is the joining point for the funicle, which is the kind of point of attachment. Yeah, I guess that's it for now. Any question now?
Yeah, sir.
Hmm?
Sir, in this diagram,
So this antipodal, sir, outside that is nucleus. So
Where is the outside nucleus?
huh?
Where outside what?
As an outside the sac of the antipodal cells, and definitely
It is nucellus. It is not nucleus. Nucellus, these are the nourishing cells. You are referring to this part?
yes.
It is nucellus. It is not nucleus. So that is when I say ovule is the multicellular structure. Pollen grain is unicellular structure. Okay, so within the ovule, you will find many cells. These individual ones, round or whatever shape they are, these are individual cells. Within embryo sac, you have these many cells. Okay, so that is not the nucleus, that is nucellus, which is the nourishing portion of the embryo as of now. Later it becomes the flesh, or it might even disappear from the fruit, but it can also become the flesh of the fruit. So that is what is nucellus.
Oh, okay.
So now I guess the doubt is clear. You were assuming that nucleus is outside. That was the question, I guess.
So what's the raphe?
So raphe is the structure which allows the funicle to grow, and that is the one which will hold the embryo, that means the ovule, to the ovary structure. So that is what is raphe. It is the internal structure of the funicle.
Wasn't there another name for the part which connects the ovule to the ovule wall? From P, I think.
What was the name?
Like we did them, like the arrangement.
Okay, I guess so. You are referring to this particular part. Where is it? Oh, it's in the earlier chapter, right? Placenta.
Yeah, placenta.
Yeah.
That's the placenta, no?
Correct.
Oh, and so the chalaza is just a part. It has no function.
Just the side, like we say, no, it is left corner, right corner. That chalaza is the opposite to micropyle.
And what's the hilum? Is the
hilum is the junction between funicle and the ovule. Right? Like we also have, like, let's say this is the ovule and this thumb is the funicle, then this junction will be called as hilum.
Oh, okay.
Like that. Yes, Adil.
So what are the antipodal cells for?
Antipodal cells, these are the nourishing cells. So whenever the embryo sac undergoes certain function, these antipodal cells are the ones which will take out the nutrition from the nearby nucellus, and then it will provide it to these cells. So that is the function of this antipodal cell, which we will see one by one. So what I plan to do is, I will write down a structure name. Let's say, for example, integument, what is the function? Antipodal cell, what is the function? Micropyle, what is the function? So that way you will have much more clarity. Yeah. Any other question? Anyone? It's already 11:01. If there are no questions, then we will stop. I will revise this in the next class again, so that we have not forgotten anything in the meanwhile. Also, do look at these structures. Ideally, I should ask you to draw it, but we will see. I might give you just as a quick assignment in terms of structure of pollen grain and the structure of ovule. Let us stop here.